Hey everybody! Not too long ago I shot a video about air stones and gas exchange, and I talked about how I believed that it was not the surface agitation that was giving you the bulk of the gas exchange. While some gas exchange does happen at the surface where there's agitation like that, I believed that the bulk of the gas exchange, what was really taking place, was the column of bubbles that was rising up through the water. That was where all the magic was happening. And so I got a few comments on that video that got me thinking about it, and I came to realize that I've never really researched any of this stuff. I've always gone by what I've sort of believed to be true and what I've understood to be true based on logic and common sense and all that kind of stuff. And I found over the years that relying on common sense and those sort of things to say, well, it stands to reason, and that's just not a good way to go about it. So I decided I was going to go ahead and do some actual research, and I looked it up, and I found out that I was indeed very wrong. It is not what is going on in that column of bubbles in the water. It's what's happening at the surface. But there's more going on at the surface than you might initially think. I was really surprised to find out what I found out. So for those of you that are short patient and you don't like my long-winded videos, that's it. That's the long and short of it. I was wrong. It's not what's going on in that column of bubbles. It really is the surface agitation, and of course the water being brought up from the bottom is sort of a secondary effect. That's not affecting the gas exchange per se, but you do need water circulation in order for the oxygen-rich water to move away from the surface and so on and so forth. So that water flow that the bubbles do create helps, but the gas exchange, that is not happening in the column of bubbles, that is actually happening at the surface. So the reason I believed that it was happening in the bubbles and not at the surface was a couple of things. For one, you can watch little tiny bubbles that are floating around the tank, and you'll see them just vanish into the thin air, or vanish into the thin water, so to speak, and they vanish, they disappear, and that's because those bubbles are dissolving into the water. So I took that piece of knowledge, and I also took some information from Corey from Aquarium Co-op. He had done some experiments, and he got good data. It was just misinterpreted data because of this one thing that I've discovered over the last couple of days that I'll get to in a moment. So what Corey did was he checked whether or not it was the water being brought up from the bottom by using pumps and power heads, and he moved water up from the bottom. He also checked to see whether it was simply surface agitation, and he did stuff with surface agitation, and then he did tests with an air stone. And the way he did the test was he checked oxygen levels in the tank first thing in the morning, right as the lights were coming on. That is going to be in a planted tank. That's going to be your lowest level of oxygen of the day. The plants use oxygen overnight. So right as the lights are coming on in the morning, your oxygen levels will be the lowest. So if you test those levels and you've had an air stone running all night and you've got higher than normal levels of oxygen, you can see how efficiently that air stone is aerating the tank. And so he did these experiments, and what he found was that moving water from the bottom to the top did increase the aeration some. He found that doing surface agitation did increase aeration some, more so than, just moving the water around. The surface agitation did greatly increase the aeration, but the air stone just blew them all out of the water. There was just no comparison to the amount of oxygen that was in the tank in the morning when he used an air stone. So based on that, it made sense. We've sort of ruled out that it was the surface agitation and it was the upwelling of the water and all that. So the only thing left in this equation is the column of bubbles. It must be that column of bubbles that's making the difference. And so that's the conclusion he came to. That made sense to me. I went with that. Again, I understand that bubbles will dissolve into your water and so on and so forth. And one of the comments I got that made me question what I thought was someone said that those tiny bubbles, if they don't make it to the surface, then they're not doing anything. They're not accomplishing anything in your aquarium if they don't make it to the surface. And I thought that, how can you say that? You know that they're dissolving into the tank. That's got to be and then I realized the word dissolving is not the same as the word exchanging. So these bubbles are actually dissolving into the tank, but that's not the same as a gas exchange. A gas exchange is when you've got CO2 that's coming out of the water and oxygen that's moving into the water. As the fish create the CO2 and they use up the oxygen, you need to swap that equation. You need to move the CO2 out of the water and you need to bring the oxygen back into the water. Simply dissolving air bubbles into water does not accomplish that. That's not the same as gas exchange. For gas exchange, you need the surface area between the atmosphere and the liquid water. And you can have gas exchange even in completely stagnant water. It does not require surface agitation, but surface tension does play a role in how efficiently the gas will exchange through it. And if you can break the surface tension, that greatly increases the gas exchange. So that's why having agitation, not just sort of rippling water across the surface, but genuine agitation, splashing, bubbling, that really increases your gas exchange. So as I'm reading all of this stuff and I'm digging through all of it, I finally found this one article or a paper that was about deep water gas exchange in the ocean and so on and so forth. And so I started reading through this thing and I got lost in the weeds. It was really just way above my head. And so I kept reading and I kept reading and I finally got to a part where it was exactly what I was looking for. The scientists that were doing this study didn't seem to understand why this was happening, but they were studying the differences between gas exchange with different surface conditions, and they found that breaking the surface tension did indeed increase the potential for gas exchange. Wave action, the wind, the choppy water, all of that stuff really increased the surface or really increased the gas exchange. But what they found that they didn't seem to be able to explain was that when the surface tension was broken from below, as in when bubbles rise to the surface and pop, that for some reason made the gas exchange it just completely different than when you just had surface agitation. And they didn't seem to know why. Breaking the surface tension should be breaking the surface tension in theory. But when you break the surface tension from below, it just knocks it out of the park as far as enabling gas exchange. So that's the secret that makes the air stones so efficient at gas exchange. It is just the surface agitation, but it's that special kind of surface agitation that you only get with bubbles rising to the surface and popping at the surface. Just having water splashing at the surface, that's good. That is a good way to increase your gas exchange. And having water, if you've got a little bit of a drop and the water flows in, or a spray bar where it's squirting down into the water, that's really going to increase your gas exchange rather than just like most of my tanks have very calm surfaces. But if you want to just hit it out of the park, if you want to throw the gas exchange to the maximum, you need an air stone, and it's got nothing to do with the bubbles in the water. It's got everything to do with those bubbles bursting at the surface. It's that bursting from underneath effect that gives you maximum gas exchange in an aquarium. So that's that one little piece of information that I did not have, that never made sense to me, why air stones were so much more efficient. Because I know simply circulating the water around the tank, which is what air stones a lot of times are said to do, it's not the bubbles, it's the movement of the water, and I just knew that simply wasn't true. And based on how well they oxygenate a tank, I knew it couldn't simply be just surface disturbance either. I've got tanks that have far more surface disturbance than an air stone causes, but I don't think are that highly oxygenated. The air stones just hit it out of the park, and it's because of that weird effect of breaking that surface tension from below that makes all the magic happen. So there you go. And that honestly is a lot of the reason why I don't like shooting these kind of like how-to videos or explaining things sort of videos, is because there's a lot of stuff out there I don't know. In fact, there's a lot more out there I don't know than I do know. So even when I say stuff that I'm really confident about, that I really fully believe that I understand, oftentimes, time will go on and I will learn that I was mistaken about something, or there's some additional piece of information that, now that I know that, it completely changes the picture. And this is one of those occasions. Without that knowledge of that water coming from below, the bubbles coming from below and breaking that surface tension from underneath, none of this would have made any sense. And that little bit of information is what pulled it all together for me. Unfortunately, I went back to find that paper. I was going to put a link below to it. In fact, I still am. But when I went back the second time, apparently the first time I read through it was just like a free preview. And now if I want to read the entire article or the entire paper, I have to download the PDF for $32. And I'm not going to, pay $32 just to download a scientific paper that I only wanted one little line out of. But I will put the link there if you want to click on it and go there. I don't know, maybe you'll get a free preview. It's a long slog. It's a lot of reading. It's very scientific. It's not narrative at all. And about half to 2/3 of the way down in there, you're going to find one or two lines where it discusses this odd anomaly of breaking the surface tension from below. And there you go. So I'll put that link down below. You can do what you want with it or whatever. But otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up. You never know what it's going to be. Oftentimes it's corrections where I've gotten things wrong or I've changed my mind or have a different opinion about something. And so if you're subscribed, you won't miss any of those videos or anything else. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.